All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are officially done with the All-Star break in Major League Baseball, which means that the unofficial second half of the season is officially underway. Even though we're a little bit more than halfway through the season, this is now the stretch run. This is where games are especially meaningful. Division races are, some of them are close, and then playoff seeding and all that stuff. We're in the stretch run of the season in the second half, obviously. That's basically what you could define it as. So that means that it's time for our second MLB teams tier list of 2022. I did one at the beginning of the season, and I think it looks a lot different than it's going to for this video now that we're going to do a mid-season tier list. Some teams have disappointed me, some have surprised me, some have done just as well or just as poorly as I thought. So let's kind of pick out what team fits in what category. So S team is going to be the teams right now that are the biggest contenders, okay? They are clearly one of the favorites to win it all, okay? A tier means I think you're clearly a playoff team, and therefore, by default, you have a pretty decent chance to win it all. You could still win it all. B tier means you're competitive, you're fighting for a playoff spot, maybe not necessarily a playoff team or just barely a playoff team, but I'm not sure if they're a contender. C team is, they're not making a fool of themselves, they're not embarrassing, they're decent, they're all right, but they're not that good, and they're probably not gonna fight for a playoff spot. D tier means you're a bottom feeder, you're trying to get that first pick of the next draft, you're complete sellers at the deadline, all that stuff. So let's see which team fits where. Guys, definitely comment your opinions. So we're gonna start with the Detroit Tigers, one of the most disappointing teams in the league, in my opinion. I think at the beginning of the year, I put the Tigers in the B tier, but now I'm gonna have to put them, honestly, I'm going to have to put them in D tier. They are like 15 plus games below 500. Nothing's worked out. I know Miguel Cabrera, it was nice that he was an all-star. It might be his last season. Who knows? But the Tigers have underwhelmed big time. I thought they were a dark horse playoff team. They are not at all. They've been really disappointing. Spencer Torkelson has not had a good rookie year. Obviously has all the time in the world to turn it around. Javi Baez has been a disappointing free agent acquisition. Tigers, D tier. Then we have the Pirates, who, you know what? They haven't been as bad as I thought. Maybe not as bad as in previous years. They're an exciting team for the future, right? With O'Neal Cruz, and they have a lot of good young players, Key Brian Hayes, but I still think they're a D tier team. I still think they're sellers. They're still a bottom barrel type of team. They're not really, C means you're a good team, maybe somewhat close to 500, but even though the Pirates have been surprising, better than I thought, they're still one of the worst teams in the league, unfortunately, but they have a lot to be excited about. Then we have the Rockies, who I thought at the beginning of the year were a C tier team, and I think they're there. They're below 500, definitely not going to contend, but they're solid. They can hold their ground. They're somewhat competitive. They're not bad. Chris Bryant, he's been injured in his first year in Colorado. I have no idea still why he's there. They're not a contending team by any means, but the Rockies are solid. They have a lot of solid players. CJ Cron, Charlie Blackmon still getting it done. So yeah, solid team. Then we have the White Sox, who I think a lot of people thought were the favorites to win the AL Central. They have been pretty disappointing, and a lot of that's due to injuries. So hopefully in the stretch run here, they maybe contend for a playoff spot or a division. Or a wild card spot somewhere. They're not too far out of a wild card spot. I had them as an A team, maybe even S tier team, I think at the beginning of the season. I'm going to put them in B tier because I believe they're exactly 500, so I can't put them higher than that. But I think in the stretch run, they're going to fight for a playoff spot. They're going to have a better post-All-Star break than pre-All-Star break. Then we have the Angels, who with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, I always trash the Angels, but for good reason, because they deserve it. They're always so disappointing. I'm tempted to, honestly, okay, I'm going to put them in the C tier because I can't, in my good conscience, in my right mind, put them in the D tier because they want to contend and they're not at the level of D tier teams. Sometimes they play like it, but I can't really believe that they're actually going to be worse than the bottom barrel teams at the end of the season. But knowing the Angels, maybe they surprise me and do even worse than I thought. But I think they're probably a C tier team, but they shouldn't be. They should be higher. Then we have the Padres, who were fighting with the Dodgers for most of the first half for the division lead in the NL West, but they have been they've struggled recently towards the All-Star break, and they're in the second wild card spot, I believe, and they're gonna get Fernando Tatis back. So I will. Wow, it's really hard to see the SD, their logo there, but I will put them in the A tier. I think they're definitely a playoff team, especially when they're gonna get arguably their best player back. So I think they have a chance. They're a playoff team. Definitely very good team, so I will put them in the A tier right now. The Royals, easy D tier. We knew they were going to be really bad because they can't pitch. They don't have the worst hitting. They have some good hitters, but pitching-wise, they're horrible. We knew this would be a problem from the beginning of the year, and they've done just as poorly, maybe even worse than we thought. They're definitely a D tier team. Cubs, I might have had them at the C tier at the beginning of the year, but they have fallen big time. They were a C-tier team earlier in the year, but the last few weeks, maybe last month, they've really struggled, and they're now a bottom-feeding, selling team at the deadline. Mark my words, they will trade someone at the trade deadline. They're definitely a D-tier team. Then we have the Houston Astros. I'm sorry. But all jokes aside, as a Dodgers fan, I'm sorry. I had to make a joke about them like I do most videos where I talk about them. But in all fairness, though, they are an S-tier team. Maybe a more complete team than even the Yankees in the American League. They have the second best record in the AL, but this team is built to win. Usually it's Altuve and Bregman who are their best hitters, but this year it's been Yordan Alvarez, who's been an MVP candidate, and Kyle Tucker, who's been great. Justin Verlander, what an awesome bounce-back season he's had. I'm actually a big Justin Verlander fan. It's been great to see him pitch back to his Cy Young caliber at age 39. Astros definitely, they're veterans, they're experienced. Dusty Baker's a great manager. They definitely have the formula to be they are one of the best teams in the league, so definitely an S-tier team, definite contender. Milwaukee Brewers, they're currently winning the Central, the NL Central. They're fighting with the Cardinals. They have been a little disappointing for a division-winning team, but I still think their pitching keeps them in the A tier. The fact that they're winning their division, by default, that makes them a contender, right? I mean, the Braves, of all the division winners, the Braves last year had the worst record, but they still won. So winning your division, I think by default, probably puts you in A tier or above, because you are a contender, I would say, right? Same with the Twins. Maybe, am I contradicting myself, right? I mean, I would say the Twins are the lowest A-tier team, but I still think they're an A-tier team because they've been surprisingly good. They do have good starting pitching overall, good pitching, very solid. They have a lot of good hitters, and they've surprised people. I don't think a lot of people thought the Twins would be winning the AL Central at this point, but they are, so therefore I think they're an A-tier team. So the Mets, so right now, in the last month, I would say the Mets have kind of played more like an A or B tier team compared to when they were an S-tier team in the beginning of the season, when they were off to a hot start like they are most years, when they were probably the best team in the NL through the first 2 months. So I would be tempted right now to put them in the A tier, but this is a team that is over 20 games above 500 without two of the best pitchers of this generation, and I have to believe that Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, there's a good chance they're there for the stretch run at the end of the season. So without them, for them to be winning their division, being the second best team in the NL behind the Dodgers, and have those two pitchers coming back, I think they are an S-tier team because of that. But without deGrom and Scherzer, the likelihood of them coming back, if they were not coming back or weren't on the team, I would put them in the A tier. But because of that, I think they're an S-tier team with them. Definitely one of the top contenders, probably the second best team in the NL after the Dodgers. Then we have the Oakland A's, who they sold off most of their team. Frankie Montas is probably getting traded as well. He's gone. Frankie's gone at the deadline, I think. So the A's are the worst team in the AL, okay? They have to be D tier. This is really an easy choice. And they're probably going to get worse because they're going to trade the players that they haven't already traded probably at the deadline. Maybe Paul Blackburn gets traded too. I don't know. We'll see who gets traded, but they're not done unpacking their roster. So they're already D tier without having fully done that. Then we have the Mariners, who are the hottest team in baseball. 14 straight wins. It's just great to see the Mariners playing good baseball. It's been so long since they've made the playoffs, and now they're firmly in a wild card spot. Julio Rodriguez taking the baseball world by storm. I think the Mariners are an A-tier team right now. I think they're only going to get better. I think they're finally going to snap that playoff drought, that long playoff drought they haven't made the playoffs since 2001. I don't ever remember seeing the Mariners in my life making the playoffs. I think that's going to change this year, and Robbie Ray is finally living up to that big contract the Mariners signed him to this offseason. Everything is coming into form. Ty France, just a lot of good players playing really well right now. The Mariners are playing great, and I think they deserve that A tier because of it. Okay, then we have the Texas Rangers. I thought the Rangers, with the additions of Corey Seager and Marcus Semien and John Gray, I thought the Rangers wouldn't be that bad. And they're not. They're not bad. They're actually very solid. I don't think they're quite B tier. I think they're kind of C tier. I really don't think they have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs, but they're playing well, especially as of late. Corey Seager's playing so well as of late. Marcus Semien got off to one of the worst starts I've ever seen to a season, but he's kind of coming out of that funk. And the Rangers are playing respectable baseball, but I still think they're a C-tier team. Then we have the Nationals, easiest D tier, one of the easiest D tiers. They're the worst team in the NL, record-wise. They're probably going to trade Juan Soto now, so there's going to be basically nothing left. It's a scorched earth thing with the Nationals. They are going to be gone, or even worse than D tier, if that's possible, after the trade deadline, potentially. Then we have the Blue Jays, who have been disappointing. I thought they were the best team in the AL coming into this year. I had them as my World Series representative out of the AL. They have not lived up to that by any means, but they're still a playoff team, and I think they're getting better and better. And I think they're an A-tier team for sure. Maybe at the end of the year, maybe an S-tier, I don't know. But I still think they're definitely a playoff team with so many star players. So by default, I think they're an A-tier team. Then we have the St. Louis Cardinals. In that division, I don't really know if we have a definite A-tier team, even though I put the Brewers as the A-tier, but that's only because they're winning their division. Cardinals are a very, very solid team, very good team. Good pitching and everything, but I will put them in the B tier because they're only a few games above 500 and just tied for that third playoff spot or that third wild card spot. So I think they're a B tier team right now. The Orioles, what a story the Orioles have been. They're playing 500 baseball and we're more than halfway through the season. I can't believe it. A bottom-feeding team like the Orioles. So out of respect for what they have done recently, out of the sheer credit for them, I think they're a B tier team because look, B tier means you might not necessarily be in a playoff spot, but you're fighting for one. The Orioles are, 2-3 games out of the wild card? I never thought I would see the day, but the Orioles are a B-tier team, at least right now. Why not? I just want to put them there. I just like the feeling of doing something unique like that you rarely get to do. So, Braves were S-tier at the beginning of the year. Just like last year, they started off the first month or two not playing well, playing below 500 baseball, but they are playing phenomenal baseball right now. The last month or two, they've been the best team in the NL East. I think they're an S-tier team because, look, this is an experienced team, the defending champs, great manager with Brian Snitker. Their star players are playing well. Acuna's back and playing well, and it's just all coming together for the Braves. So they're still that same championship-level team, I think, from last year, obviously, minus Freddie Freeman, but Matt Olson's been pretty solid in his spot, and this is still the world champion team, regardless of whether or not Freddie Freeman's on the roster. So they're an S-tier team for sure, in my opinion. D-backs have played surprisingly well this year. I thought they were a D-tier team, but I think they're a C-tier team. They're solid. Their pitching's solid. They have some good hitters, Ketel Marte, right? And they have some other good young hitters as well. The future's not too dark, let's just say, in the Valley. I think the D-backs are a very solid team. Definitely not a pathetic team. Definitely not a bottom-feeding team. They're remotely competitive. They're not a pushover. They're not an easy team to beat. It's not a guaranteed sweep whenever you're playing the D-backs if you're a great team. Then we have the Red Sox, who were in a playoff spot, but because the Mariners have played really well and the Blue Jays are playing all right, and the Red Sox have not played too well the last couple weeks heading into the All-Star break, I think they've slipped from an A team to a B team because they're only a few games above 500. So I think they're kind of fighting for that third wild card spot. They're not in a playoff spot right now because the three wild cards are the Jays, the Mariners, and the Rays. So they're not in a playoff spot, but they're fighting for one. So they're a B team because of that. The Marlins have surprisingly really good pitching, obviously, with Sandy Alcantara probably being the Cy Young winner right now. They're not terrible. I don't think they're a D team. I think they're in the C tier. They're like 5 games out of a wild card spot for the NL. I think it's very unlikely that they make it. not impossible, but they're also not at the bottom of the pack. They have respectable pitching, some good hitters, Jazz Chisholm, obviously, Sandy Alcantara. They have some stars. They have some really good players. So I'll give some credit to the Marlins. I think they're a solid, decent team. C tier, I think, is very fitting for them. Then we have the Yankees, the best team in baseball. How can you not put the best team in baseball record-wise in the S tier? I mean, I think the Yankees might be due for some minor regression. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be the best team in baseball at the end of the 162. I think they could be, and I think they're going to win 100 games, and they're definitely a contender for sure. Maybe the top contender right now, and they probably have the AL MVP and Aaron Judge on their team, right? So it's an obvious S tier for sure. I am curious to see how they do in the second half, though, if they're going to regress or if they're going to continue being dominant, because going into the All-Star break, they haven't been playing as well as they did in the first 2-3 months of the season. So we'll see, though. But definitely S tier for the Yankees, no doubt about it. Rays, I think they always find a way to be an A tier team, always a definite playoff team. And I think a contender because of it. Because in baseball, if you make the playoffs, I think you're a contender in all likelihood. And Kevin Cash and the Rays, with their limited budget, keep finding a way to find great pitching, starting pitching with Shane McClanahan, right? And then their bullpen's always good. And they do a great job with platooning their hitters and just finding a way to be a really, really good baseball team. So they're an A tier, just like they are at least an A tier most years. Cincinnati Reds, they have been playing better baseball as of late. I still think they're a D tier team, though. They're one of the worst. I think them, the Nationals, and the Cubs, I think, are the three worst teams in the NL. So I would have definitely said D tier for Cincinnati, but because they've been playing better recently, I'll give them some credit. Maybe D+, but I still think they're a D tier team. Then we have the Cleveland Guardians, who are fighting for a playoff spot. They're kind of like the Orioles. They're looking in at that third wild card spot, but they're not too far out. They have solid pitching. Jose Ramirez is one of the best players in the league. I think they're a B tier team. I think they're a good team. They have a shot at a playoff spot, so B tier. Dodgers, easiest S tier, maybe of all the S tiers. I mean, they're clearly the best team in the NL, record-wise, and I think just in general. And then I think they're playing so well right now. I think at the end of the year, there's a chance they could be the best team in baseball over the Yankees. We'll see, but there shouldn't be any doubt in anyone's mind that the Dodgers are no doubt contenders. If they're not a top 3 team to you, I don't know what I can't really help you, because the Dodgers are clearly every year one of the best teams in baseball. Okay, no question about it. Phillies, I really hope the Phillies make the playoffs. It's been so long since they've made it. Bryce Harper obviously getting injured kind of sucks, but the Phillies are in a wild card spot. The question is, are they a B team or an A tier team? The bullpen still concerns me, and they're only a few games above 500, so maybe they finish as an A tier, but right now, I think they're a B tier team, but they're in a playoff spot, so you could argue maybe A tier, hopefully A tier by the end of the season, but they're a very good team, or at least a very solid team, so B tier, I think at least maybe B+, A-, A tier, in that A to B range. And last but not least, we have the San Francisco Giants. I was one of those people who never for a second believed that the Giants would replicate what they did last year, and I was right. That, just looking at that roster, regardless of Buster Posey retiring, even last year's roster was not an S-tier 107-win caliber team. I think they just had a phenomenal year. Credit to them for pulling that off, but I think they were due for some obvious regression this year, and I didn't think they really had a great chance to win the division, and I didn't even think they were a guaranteed playoff team. And they were struggling for a while. They are playing a little better the last week or two. I think B tier is right. I think they have a chance at a wild card spot, but they're not in a wild card spot right now. They're kind of on like an 85-win pace. So I think B tier is fitting. They have a shot, again, at a playoff spot, but they're not going to win the division, and they're not a definite playoff team by any stretch. So I think that's fitting. The Giants are a solid B tier team. So guys, that is our mid-season MLB tier list team going post All-Star break into the unofficial second half of the year. Definitely comment your opinions. Where do you think I'm wrong? Where do you think I'm right? Let me know anything you think about any of these teams. Definitely comment your opinions. Like the video if you enjoyed. If you're a sports fan and you haven't subbed already, consider subbing. That would be so much appreciated. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.